This is CG Talks, the podcast where CG guys talk about CG.
This podcast is powered by GarageFarm.net, a place where 3D cloud rendering is incredibly fast and cheap.
Hello everyone, welcome to CG Talks, the podcast where CG guys talk about computer graphics. My name is DJ and I'm your host, and today on CG Talks I'm privileged and excited to talk with Kay John Yim, an architect by day and CG artist by night, as he describes himself. I hope we get to know so much more about him and his work during the podcast. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kay John Yim. Can you tell us a few words about yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kay John Yim. I'm an architect, and I'm a CG artist as well by night, like my slogan says. And I grew up in Hong Kong, and I always has a fascination with art and with buildings around me. And I got into 3D because I was given an opportunity to get into digital art basically when I was studying in high school. And I started looking into Photoshop, Illustrator. 3D become apparent for me when I want to do perspective drawings, and since then it has become really an inseparable part of my life. And my online portfolio or my online persona really began since COVID, and that led me to here meeting people online, and then eventually getting onto this podcast.
Yeah, great. So, as you mentioned, your portfolio and taking a look at your portfolio on the ArtStation, I could feel that this is a work done by an architect. Because the architecture is like a background hero, of your artworks. And how do you marry these two worlds, like the imaginative fantasy artist and the architect? Do you really show and you don't really show a typical architect's portfolio online? Are you personally and emotionally more into that night persona of yours?
Yeah. So originally, as like I said, my as you refer to, my night persona really only began because of COVID. With time freed up from my daily commute, I treated that as an opportunity to learn as much as possible, with the original goal of applying everything I learned back to work. And so I set a schedule to learn one thing every week, be it a software or a plugin, and then applying it to a project and then publishing it online. I gradually introduced a fantasy element to my work because I want my personal works to belong to its own category rather than being lumped into a large pool of ArcViz renders online. And plus, it is a lot of fun. As to how I marry the two worlds together, I usually first create an environment based in reality. Let's just say that accounts for 80% of the image, and then I would then fit in the rest with whatever fantasy elements I see fit into the environment. I'm a huge fan of anime, which we can talk more about later. That is also where I draw a lot of my inspiration. And this is, of course, not a straightforward process. It usually takes up to like hundreds of iterations, and on average about 3 to 4 months to get to the result that I like. And to your question, that why I don't have a normal architect's portfolio is simply because the professional work that I worked on are all under NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, which is why I can't share them publicly.
Yeah, that's a situation that many CG artists face, that they have to do their own private projects just to have something to show in the portfolio, because a lot of work is NDA'd.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the architecture as well. Like, I read a lot of maybe I call it romantic nostalgia for like stylized architecture, Baroque, classical, or like generally stylish architecture and fashion from the era before modernism. Like, I wanted to ask you, is it because your daily work involves like modern architecture, or maybe it's like your thing, this retro architecture, or is there anything more behind this?
Yeah, so a lot of people think that I actually do my work, focus a lot on classical architecture because I want to separate. Um, I want to get away from work, but it is actually the opposite. In fact, my professional work got me into classic architecture in the first place. A lot of the projects that I worked on are high-end residential projects, which are usually in the style of classic architecture without all the ornaments and the decorations. But there are two main reasons why I focus a lot on classic architecture. Number one is because classic architecture, Baroque in particular, are technically more challenging and the most satisfying to model. The second reason is that classic architecture, unlike modern architecture, which basically only began in the 20th century, have withstood the test of time for centuries, as in its aesthetics, space proportion, and structure. So my thought is, if I'm going to spend the time to learn the software and to model, might as well model and replicate classic architecture to learn from the old masters. And in fact, I've actually learned more about design and architectural details through modeling and replicating classic architecture in the past 3 years compared to my time at university, to be honest.
Mhm. Yeah, that's that also involves like a lot of craftsmanship. I'd say, because the old architecture was yeah, like it involved a lot of handwork by masons and all the hand workers of like art workers that were involved in creation of this. And that gets me to a question that I'm thinking, like, you are also modeling your architectural parts, and it's also like a manual work, so to speak, in a way.
Yeah.
But nowadays there's like a whole wave of AI and trying to automate everything, like for machines to do really everything for humans, so to speak. Like, what's your take on that wave? And like, are you into that? People who are scared of losing their jobs, or do you think that this is something else, or is there more value in handwork than just tedious process? But do you see anything positive in this?
I am very conflicted about AI. I've been listening to a lot of people's opinions through podcasts and YouTube videos about AI very recently. On one hand, I think AI and AI powered softwares are fascinating. I personally have used AI to interpolate and denoise my animations years before the recent hype. And of course, I've tried as many generative AIs as I could get my hands on, more specifically, texture to image AIs like Midjourney, DALL-E, and Stable Diffusion. But
Mhm.
on the other hand, I don't really see the AI as a tool. I know this might be controversial, but I see them actually as replacements for artists. I think, and let me explain, I think the copyright um, of the data set used for training these AIs are questionable. But let's just put that aside. Midjourney alone in the past 4 months has improved so much that, um, and not to mention that the AI models that Google and Facebook are currently training will be capable of letting you just type in the line and produce an entire video. Um, Another AI model like GPT-3 already allowed AI to write poetry, lyrics, and essay much better than the average person. So it is really not hard to imagine a world where generative AIs are completely automated, where they write their own prompts and post images on your Instagram timeline based on your taste. Uh, I got to say AI has ruined a lot of social media for me, because whenever I open Pinterest, it is just an entire page of AI image. So when one day, I think when every image that we come across online becomes generated by AI, the artistry and the craftsmanship that most of us appreciate today will be devalued a lot. Um, yeah, so Yeah, so I'm fascinated, but also found it quite disturbing at the same time. I'm sure you have talked to a lot more artists about this
Yeah,
regarding. Yeah,
it's the topic that kind of naturally comes up because it's lately everywhere in the media, and we're kind of as artists we are all affected by this. And I think this is a kind of a revolution, like technological revolution that reminds me of times. Reminds me, no, I've just read about this because it was like a century ago when all the industrial revolution and automation in production and the modern architecture that was also like the result of this industrial revolution, and the thinking about doing things in a new way, automating processes, and it made a lot of things that were needed before obsolete, or they
yeah,
had to change, like all the there was also art movements that were kind of contrary to that, like the crafts arts and crafts movement, and like some nostalgia of the past. But this also gave like a new look at there's a different value that we put into something that's mass produced, and a different value or different things that we expect from like things that are unique and thoughtful. Even art changed because all the conceptual art, things like that, they would have never been possible before that, probably
yeah,
because the craft was needed really. And after the photography, all the inventions, this just like forced people to think about what art is really for, like why do we do this. And I think the AI thing is also kind of making people question, why do we even do art? Why do we do 3D renders, right? Is it just
yeah,
to replicate the reality, or to say something more? Like maybe the tools that we are involving so much time into the tools, they're not, they're just tools, right? But why do we do it and how we do it? That's the question right now.
yeah.
And I think that you mentioned
Yeah,
like a pretty interesting thing about Pinterest, that AI is ruining this, because right now, like all the AIs are trained on something that has been created by humans before,
yep,
and this is kind of like a finite pool of artworks. It seems huge and maybe like too huge to imagine, but it's finite. And like, of course, AI can produce some new variations and stuff like that, but probably this would be a totally different AI that's trained on the data set that's right now, and the data set that would be possible in 50 years from now with more
yeah,
human made art. And it's pretty interesting, like how it will all evolve, right? The current systems, and will there be like separate branches? Well, I don't have answers, like more questions than answers. Even talking about this with many artists, it seems like the more we dive into the topic, the more questions arise.
yeah. Yeah, me too. I have a lot more questions, and yeah, I'm very conflicted, I must say. But maybe we can like get back in a couple of years, and everything could have changed. I might be doing something else completely, then entirely different than what I'm doing today. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm just like trying to there's also visual artists that are comparing the situation with visual artists, like their work being scraped by the algorithms. And there's a different situation in the music industry, for example. It's a little bit more law protected. The copyright thing is like a little bit longer going on than in the visual arts, so that the AIs in music industry are not that big of a deal yet, and probably because of these law issues. But uh, there's also like the production value that's allowed for musical production. For example, right now, you can be a total. You don't have to be able to sing clearly, or clean sounds. Everything can be then post produced in the computer. In the computer, like it seems to be a lot of automation in the process of music production, but still it's like there's a lot of people that really want to go for the raw sound of a live musician. that's what I'm thinking. That is like the AI can produce some area of creation, but then there's also always going to be a need for this human part in this whole process, because that's why art is created in the first place, right? So that a human can communicate with other humans. And maybe this
Yeah,
will be like two separate areas of art, right? Like computer generated art and human based art. That's
yeah.
just my thought.
I hope so. I hope I really hope that um, AI art could be a separate category from rather than simply just replacing every other replacing or imitating every other category. Like there's a sort of a new type of very AI specific art that is having generating different frames and then blending them, interpolating them together. That is starting to pop up on social media. I think that is very special and quite and a lot more interesting than, say, people using Midjourney to replicate some traditional or oil painting. But um, yeah,
Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see probably what comes out of it.
yeah,
But while this is happening, let's maybe talk about an artist doing things just for himself, like to improve his workflow. Like you mentioned, you wanted to learn new softwares, new things, try out different areas, and I've seen that you've participated also in a lot of online community challenges. Like
mhm,
CG Boost challenge or Punishers, the Clinton Jones YouTube channel, Infinite Journeys. I've seen your work there.
yeah.
So which one of these challenges did you enjoy most or like learn most from? Maybe can you tell us about your
Yeah,
experience with this kind of thing?
this is actually a hard question because a lot of the work that I've done is simply hard for me to look back at. Just because whenever I look back at them retrospectively, I know I can do a lot better now, and a lot of the time, I wish I could have put more time rather than rushing them out for the especially for a competition, say. But if I have to pick one, it would be The Magician. It is the one with the blonde lady dancing in the Golden Gallery, which I think have a good balance among architecture, character, and fantasy. It also encapsulated everything I love about CG is be that the medium being able or allow me to replicate and or cheat reality however I want. Like for instance, I use a lot of fake lighting so that the gold blinks a lot more than it would in reality. And also, I believe that is by far one of the longest running projects of all the ones that I've published, which took about 6 to 7 months.
Hmm. Yeah, that's pretty long for 3D artwork.
Yeah.
This podcast is powered by GarageFarm.net. Visit our webpage and check out our rendering solutions.
Talking a little bit more about your artworks, I find that they are quite, they are using a lot of, I would call it quite cinematic composition, lighting, with some moody lighting setups that remind me of cinematic approach. And I wanted to ask about your inspirations. Like, do you get inspiration from this kind of from, like you mentioned, anime and maybe cinema, or what are some artists that you look up to, like your
Y-
art heroes that inspire your art?
Yeah, so I actually don't look at ArcVis or CG at all for inspiration. In fact, I actively try to avoid looking at other CG work unless it is a Pixar movie, for instance. Uh, Compositionally, I took a lot of inspiration from Wes Anderson movies. One of the most famous one, or my favorite one, is actually Budapest Hotel. which is very famous for its meticulous symmetrical shots. I personally like them very much because his works really stand out from the rest of the movies nowadays. A lot of which cinematography are basically just coverage and an afterthought. Lighting wise, I learned a lot mostly by watching movie B rolls. Um, I One person that I looked up to a lot is Roger Deakins, who was the DP for Blade Runner and 1917 and Skyfall, just to name a few. And 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 his principle is basically just simple lighting and use as little artificial lighting as possible. And that's what that's what I always aspire to do, even though I still sometimes struggle with using very simple lighting and tend to cheat quite a bit. My and Yeah, and my camera motions are actually inspired by anime, like you said, and more notably anime produced by Shaft Studio, which include anime include Bakemonogatari, the Case Study of Vanitas, and more recently, The Call of the Night. They have some very iconic slow motion head turns or hair movements, which are I find very unique and very mesmerizing in anime, and which of course I have to try to replicate that in CG.
So kind of you could say that your artwork, like you mentioned, that you grew up in Hong Kong, so it's kind of
Yeah,
like a clash of cultures with a lot of inspiration from Asia, and you live in London, so it's kind of like and the architecture that you use is a lot of has a lot of European heritage, but not uniquely. Like I've seen some Asian architecture as well. So
yeah.
yeah, that's I think that makes it pretty unique because yeah, it's like a worldwide, but like a clash of East and West. Um, it produces pretty interesting results, I think. So, does this artwork of yours bring you any income, or is it just a labor of love for now?
Yeah, it's purely a labor of love. Even though I do get sponsors occasionally, they all just eventually goes into funding my rent a farm budget or my software subscriptions. As it stands now, it is not a source of income. I've thought about monetizing my work through, say, Patreon tutorials, but then everything in CG is moving in such a fast pace that, and then especially AI with AI now. So tutorials about using softwares are almost guaranteed to become obsolete in like a year. Um, so I might change my opinion on about this about creating tutorials, um, as it stands now, it is a all of the projects that I do. It is just a process that I very much enjoy um, and very meditative, a way that I try to relax um, and get away from um, work, get away from all the bad news nowadays.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. On the topic of monetization, I've seen some of your work being sold or listed on the NFT markets. That was like a super hyped topic uh, like half a year ago, and then the crypto crash happened, so it kind of quieted down. But after the rise and fall of this hype, let's call it,
Yeah.
do you see like NFTs being still like a relevant source of income, or like a way for artists to monetize their work, or is the future elsewhere?
I think the technology, blockchain technology, is very promising, but NFT has gained such a bad reputation by its association with cryptocurrencies, or rather, a lot of bad actors within the crypto community who only sees NFT as a money grab. A case in point is about a year ago, there's a very popular trend, the 10,000 NFT trend, where people are basically putting little to zero effort at all and selling like very like uh, like tiny iterations of one single NFT at ridiculous prices, and as a result, the NFT bubble popped. So, and more recently, the collapse of the second largest crypto exchange will deter a lot of people from buying cryptocurrencies, and of course, buying NFTs at least in the coming year, I think. So I don't see NFT going mainstream anytime soon. Which will also depend very much dependent on future legislations, things like that.
Yeah, so generally, we can see that nothing is certain in these times for an artist, which maybe makes it like an interesting time to live in. I'm hoping like there's this famous Chinese proverb, right? Uh, we hope like may you live in interesting times, right, or something like in the lines of it. So I think we do live in interesting times for artists. And I'm really hoping that that all these AI, NFT, all those waves, shockwaves that go through the art world, they won't kill us, kill our urge to make art. Because like I've seeing your artworks, I think it gives a lot of value to both you as a creator and the audience that can watch it and enjoy it and get inspired by it. Like I mentioned, this challenge of Clinton Jones with these mega montages of different artists doing takes on a single topic. I think it was mind blowing. Like there are a lot of experienced artists and a lot of beginners, but watching all of these different original takes, I'm getting like a totally different vibe than just watching the AI generated imagery, even though it's also like it's flooding the internet, right? But I'm seeing like there's a lot more originality. I think still, this is a question whether AI can be original in the end, or is it just something that can kind of like mix whatever creative work humans do. But I think that's the thing that would require like a whole a whole episode of philosophical debate for a whole podcast of itself, right?
Yeah.
Maybe to sum up this part of our conversation before we go into the second part, that I wanted to focus more on the technical side and the the craft, so to speak. Maybe let's tell the audience where they can find your artworks. They can enjoy watching your creations online, follow your work.
Yeah, so currently I'm most active on YouTube. I'm trying to grow my YouTube channel by very slowly. So you can find me at K_John Yim on YouTube. Same handle on Instagram. You can find if you search for my full name, Kay John Yim, you can find me on ArtStation. Yeah. So if you want to support my art, I very much appreciate if you could subscribe to my YouTube channel or my ArtStation or Instagram.
Yeah, thanks. I already followed your channel and the ArtStation, so I'm hoping our audience also does that and support you in your artistic journey and maybe get inspired by it, and maybe they will do also their own artworks. So I guess we can call this part done, and I'm hoping that you all join us in the second part of the conversation that will be discussing the tools, the 3D programs, and all the technical nitty-gritty of 3D artists' work.
Thank you.